Okay, with that in mind, it's 1:35. I'm going to call the February meeting of the Ukiah Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency to order. And first on the agenda is roll call.
Director Crane.
Present.
Director Gasca.
Here.
Director Navarez. Absent. Director McNorlin.
Present.
Director White.
Here.
And Chair McCordy.
Here. All right, moving on to the next agenda item is approval of the agenda.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, with that in mind, let's go ahead and roll call vote.
Okay, Director Crane.
Aye.
Director Gasca.
Aye.
Director Navarez. Director McNorlin.
Aye.
Director White.
Aye.
And Chair McCordy.
Yes. Okay, motion carries. Moving on to item number 3, which is public comment on items not on the agenda. This time is reserved for the public to address the board about matters not on the agenda and within the jurisdiction of the board. Persons wishing to speak on the specific agenda item should do so at the time specified for those items. Is there any public comment in the room? Do we have any public comment online? Okay, I don't see any, so we're going to go ahead and move on to the next item, and that would be consent. The consent calendar, does anyone wish to pull anything for consideration? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay. Is there any public comment on the consent calendar? I don't see any, so let's go ahead for a roll call vote.
Okay, doke. Director Crane.
Aye.
Director Gasca.
Aye.
Director Navarez is absent. Director McNorlin.
Aye.
Director White.
Aye.
And Chair McCordy.
Yes. Motion carries. Next, we'll move on to item number 5, which is discussion and possible action items. The first one is GSA Governance Compliance Assessment. So this is for Lauren.
One second, Lauren. Because we can't get you coming through on the audio, just give me 1 second and then we'll get started on this one. And then we will have to go from there. So 1 second, Lauren.
I know.
Hey, Lauren, I'm going to ping you with my phone number and we're going to do it this way where you call me and I'll put you on speaker through my cell phone. All right, go ahead.
Hold on, I'm just muting myself on Zoom really fast so there's not too much feedback. And, okay. Can everyone hear me? Does this work?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Sounds good. So thank you, everyone, Board of Directors, for having me back to discuss the GSA Governance Compliance Assessment with the Social Media Use Policy. I will give a short presentation overviewing AB 992, which is the law that the Social Media Use Policy is intended to address. And then last time we talked about this, one of the directors brought up questions about freedom of speech, so I can address that briefly as well, and then I'm happy to entertain any questions that you may have. Okay, so AB 992 amended section 54952.2 of the Brown Act, which is the section that prohibits board members from meeting with a majority of your board outside of a public meeting, and it prohibits serial meetings, which is where a majority of the board members functionally have a meeting by playing telephone or communicating with a person functioning as a hub to spread opinions and ideas and messages that really should be reserved for a public meeting under the Brown Act. So AB 992 is actually more restrictive than the normal and previous Brown Act prohibitions on meetings. So under AB 992, board members are allowed to do the following on an open social media platform: answer questions, provide information to the public, and solicit information from the public regarding a matter that is within the board's subject matter jurisdiction.
Lauren, for just a brief moment, are you sharing your screen right now?
No.
Okay, sorry, just wanted to double check.
No problem. The prohibitions under AB 992 and where it gets more strict than the previous Brown Act prohibitions is that when you're on an open social media platform, board members may not discuss amongst themselves business that is specifically within the board's subject matter jurisdiction, and they may not respond directly to another board member's communication. So this includes things like public posts, shares, likes, etc. And that's regarding a matter within the board's subject matter jurisdiction. So because the law is new and it hasn't been subject to case law yet and a lot of interpretation yet, at this point, our firm is also interpreting AB 992 to mean that board members should not interact regarding matters within the board's subject matter jurisdiction in a closed social media group. So think a private Facebook group, because that engagement, including answering questions, providing information, soliciting information, etc., which is normally allowed under AB2 under an open social media platform, it's not allowed when you're in a closed group that's exclusive to only some people, certain members of the public, etc. Another interpretation that we have of AB 992 is that when interacting on social media, board members should be mindful of whether other board members have also responded, reacted to, liked, shared, etc. a post. Do not refer to comments or shares of other board members. And the safest practice is to avoid commenting, sharing, or liking a post if another board member has already done so. And so the purpose of the social media use policy is to bring AB 992 to people's attention, social media, or board members' attention. Social media is something that's very commonly used now, and people might decide to use it for matters pertaining to the position on the board as a director. And so having a social media use policy is just an easier to reference way to, kind of understand prohibitions on AB 992, prohibitions on board members from AB 992, and it's easier to understand than actually going to the Brown Act itself and trying to read the language of the statute, which is just a bit convoluted, and again, hasn't been subject to a lot of interpretation at this point. So regarding the freedom of speech questions, if there's a concern that adopting a social media use policy violates the First Amendment, the answer to that is that the board of directors is a voluntary board. So the board may impose speech restrictions on itself in order to perform its duties and in order for the board members to perform their duties as board members. If the concern is about whether AB 992 or the Brown Act violates the First Amendment, the short answer to this is that the First Amendment's not unlimited, and there may be time, place, and manner restrictions on speech in order to achieve a significant government interest, as long as the restrictions are applied evenly across the board. And what that means is that restrictions need to be content neutral, so can't favor one political party or the other. So at the end of the day, the board, this is not the type of policy that the board absolutely has to adopt in order to function, like how a code of ethics policy or a conflict of interest code is essential to the functioning of a board. This one's not essential in that same way, but it is something that our firm has been recommending to our clients, especially if there is confusion around the restrictions from AB 992 and what board members may and may not do under this new version of the law. If you decide to not adopt this policy, you are still subject to AB 992 because that's actually state law now. And so those prohibitions on board members' social media engagement is mandatory under state law, regardless of whether or not the board adopts this particular policy. And I'm happy to entertain any questions that you may have at this time.
Any questions from board members? Let me just have a quick little poll here. So how many people routinely use social media on our board?
I post pictures of my dog and my child. That's about it.
Okay.
I don't use it for anything else.
No, I don't. I generally don't. So I think this applies to Adam.
I'm fine passing this.
Okay. I prefer our board be compliant with, if the state thinks this is important enough, then I think we should be compliant, and I'd entertain a motion to, for the staff's recommended action.
Can I ask one question?
Yes, you may.
It's the, on education and training, the sexual harassment training, I didn't realize that all electeds, whether we supervise anyone or not, have to have sexual harassment training. That's true?
Lauren, did you get that?
Oh, sorry, was that a question for me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think I've got some echoing because I don't quite have the phone Zoom thing figured out. So the question was...
yeah, I've been
whether or not
elected
sexual
for
harassment-
like 14 years, never had sexual harassment training. I didn't realize it was mandatory if I wasn't overseeing anyone.
Yeah, so unless I'm misunderstanding something, that's not quite on topic for this agenda topic. So or this agenda item. So I just want to be really careful about staying on topic with the agenda.
It's in the,
but that is definitely something that we can talk about.
it's in our packet.
That's under the consent items, I think.
Oh, it was.
I think that's the
consent?
Lawrence, but we'll follow up
No.
with you to talk about that specifically.
All right.
Okay, any other questions? Anyone want to make a motion?
I'll move the recommended action.
Okay, so we have a first and second to move the recommended action. Roll call vote, please.
Can I get clarity as to who that second was too?
Second was...
It was from Al. Okay,
I'm sorry.
thank you.
Al.
Director Crane.
Aye.
Director Gasca.
Aye.
Director Navarez is absent. Director McNerlin. Aye. Director White.
Aye.
And Chair McCordy.
Yes.
The motion passes. That's not part of the packet?
All right, well, we're moving right along here.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Moving right along here, so we're on to the rate and fee study. Do you need a break before we start, or are we ready to go?
Indigo, what do you think? Do we want to wait till 2:05 to stay on point with the agenda, so anyone who misses it or doesn't show up on 2:05? Anyone have any reservations starting earlier for part of it, but still take a break at 2:05 anyway?
I'm I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Indigo. Is your mic on?
Sorry, I was just going to point out that if we want to try and fix our technology issues and take a brief break, since Shailene is supposed to present the first item under agenda item 6.
Okay. So with that said, I would propose we just take a 15-minute break to make sure we can get all the technology issues resolved, and then we'll get started again at 2:05. And then Shailene will be presenting remotely on the workshop feedback. Anyone object to that? No? Okay. Thank you so much.
All right, so we're resuming our meeting, and Shailene is going to, no, I guess Catherine is going to be doing a presentation on the recap of our public workshop in January.
Or does one of those work?
I'll turn it on.
Sure. That one works. Kind of close to it.
Thank you for your patience, everyone.
Can you hear me okay, or should I get closer?
You have to be kind of close
I
to
gotta
it
get
to
closer.
work, so.
Okay, I'll get. All right, let's do this. Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Catherine Hansford with Hansford Economic Consulting. We're going to start out our workshop today with a recap of the January 11th public workshop that was held in Redwood Valley. So we had excellent turnout at this workshop. We had about 60 people or so. We had a line out the door, actually. It was an excellent facility for conducting the workshop, and we were really pleased that the word had gotten out and that people came and showed up. This workshop was a great opportunity to reintroduce the GSA in general, to provide an update about the GSP and how it's been accepted by the state, in addition to having the fee study presentation. Go to the next slide. So the key points really that came out of this meeting was that the public were frustrated with the state's mandate. They were frustrated that Ukiah Valley is being regulated for groundwater management, and they were frustrated at the requirement for the GSA to be self-funded with no assistance financially for the mandated operations and reporting to the state. I would say most of the audience did not understand the role and the need of the GSA, and it did not realize that the GSP was complete and had been state approved already. So it was a really good opportunity for GSA staff who were in attendance, and also one of our board director, Gaska, was there as well, to be able to answer some more general types of questions as well. They desired transparency about the GSA's budget and how monies will be allocated for the necessary state reporting and the GSA operations and management. And they were not supportive of premature groundwater projects or actions taken before more is known about the outcome of Potter Valley project. We did have several domestic well owners in the audience, and we heard from them. So first of all, they said that they don't want to be metered. They're concerned about paying a fee to use water from their own well after paying for the well to be drilled and paying for the electricity charges to pump that water to their homes. Some well owners have not noticed issues with pumping, even in drought years. But we also heard from someone who was concerned about groundwater domestic well, their well running out of water because they had learned of experience of neighbors experiencing water quantity issues. So we kind of heard from both sides of that, you know, some people saying there wasn't a problem, some people saying that there was a problem, or that they were concerned about a future problem if the groundwater was not taken care of. There were concerns about the GSA regulating the number of wells that can be drilled, especially in Redwood Valley. And then there was some discussion about what the wells that are fed by surface water or shallow aquifers, and wondering if that's really groundwater. Why would they pay a groundwater management fee if that's not truly groundwater? Thanks. So other things that we heard that were more specific to the fee study itself was that generally, again, they were supportive of different land use types being considered in the fee structure. And that the groundwater users should pay by the water type and amount that's used. And that if groundwater is considered an inclusive issue in the basin, the entire basin, then all water users should pay something. There was some concern that this is inevitable, you're going to charge the fee. Why are you inviting us here? Do we get any choice or any say in this? And then they want to know how much is the fee amount that would be charged based on the GSA's cost and needs. So, I mean, that's really, those are all the key things that we heard from the public. Overall, I would say it was just a very good meeting in the sense everybody was very cordial. We had a full room, so all great behavior and people listening to each other. So very, very good in that regard. We do have another community meeting coming up in March. It's March 13th at 6 p.m., and that will be at the Ukiah Valley Veterans Hall. Any questions about the public workshop?
Any questions from board members? Any questions from anyone in the room? I don't think we can do questions from online, can we? Or
We can do questions online if they raise their hand and type in their question. Otherwise, that is the only option I think we have at the moment. Anyone online have a question? Please raise your hand and type it in. Not seeing any, I think we can proceed.
okay.
All right, then I think we can move on to the next item. And just give Indigo a moment here to pull up the next slideshow. And this is talking about the fee pathway. We started out our meetings in October talking about the fee pathway. We touched on it again in January. And today we are looking for direction and a decision on the fee pathway. So many of these slides are somewhat repetitive. I know you've seen them before, but I'm going to go through them again. First of all, when thinking about which fee pathway to choose, you want to be very mindful of the purpose of the new fee. Is this fee supporting just regulatory types of activities, or is it also supporting what's called management activities? If it's just supporting regulatory activities, you could go down this, what they call the Proposition 26 route. This is for regulatory types of fees. If this new money will be used for management activity for things like land acquisition, and I should specify that means that the GSA owns the land. So you could help fund a partner agency who purchases land for a project. That would not be the GSA owning that land, okay? If you wanted to build projects, again, the GSA's own projects, and in a sense become a water provider, then you need to go down what's called the Proposition 218 pathway. And a Proposition 218 pathway it's considered a property-related fee, and it has just a couple of different steps in its implementation, and adoption and implementation. So if it's just regulatory types of activities, you're documenting what you're doing, you're reporting to DWR, you're conducting studies, you might be running some different kinds of programs filling data gaps, inspecting facilities, ensuring that regulations that have been adopted by the GSA are being conducted, then that would be a Proposition 26 fee.
So Catherine, I'm curious, we have our wells that we put in for monitoring. How do they fit into this picture?
Yeah, those are typical Prop 26 types of activities. You can have monitoring wells, you can have weather stations, other types of data gathering devices. Those are all still considered to be eligible under the Prop 26 fee.
And on the other hand, if we actually want to build infrastructure, then we would need to go to Proposition 218.
Correct.
Any other questions from board members just on this point before we move on?
All I want to say is, I don't want to spend all I want to say is I don't want to spend too much time on this question, because we've said from the very beginning that we were really focusing on Prop 26, so
Okay.
sooner we can get to that decision point and move on to the other stuff, the better.
Okay.
Second.
All right, let's go.
Not to rush you or anything, but
All right, Indigo, let's go to the next slide. I'll go through these fairly quickly. I've already mentioned the capital projects, the regulatory fee cannot fund those. What's important here, I think, from this slide for you to take away is this nexus. So on a regulatory fee, you must demonstrate reasonableness in terms of the dollars or the amount being paid for the activity, and also for the burden to benefit received. Those are the two things that will, if you have a Prop 26 fee, you need to demonstrate through the fee report. And then noticing, I'll mention that too, that you need to have a notice at least 20 days before a public meeting or hearing in the newspapers, and you need to put materials onto your website. And so it's just a little bit different from the Prop 218 type of noticing to every single record owner. Okay? Okay, customer vote, so regulatory fee, there's no vote, there's no ballot. Property-related fee with 218, same thing, but people can protest. That would be the difference there. And then just focus in on adjustments. So with the Prop 26 fee, you have the ability to adjust the fee whenever needed, whenever you want to because of a need. Again, following those noticing and adoption requirements. So it's a little bit more flexible in that regard, that from year to year, you could tweak the fee and make updates. Okay?
can I just make a quick comment here? Coming from what's been going on with Mendocino County, where we've deferred increasing fees on things, and then coming to the reality that, hey, you know what, this isn't 2001 anymore. These giant fee jumps are really unpopular, and I would recommend that we make a policy of keeping up with inflation and adjusting as our expenses, go up. We better be sure that we don't get left behind on it. Thank you.
All right, so I've really touched on these before. So the two different fee pathways, the way it's written in Sigma and the water code, it's two different sections of water code. So as you choose which one you're doing, you'll be following either water code 10730 or 10730.2. Okay. I do want to be very clear that the fee pathway choice does not affect the fee structure. It affects the timing and the procedure of adopting the fee. I also want to let you know that the stakeholders that we have spoken to showed greatest support for Proposition 26 regulatory fee because they believe that best describes what the agency is doing and what it will be using the money for. Okay, so yeah, I think that really encapsulates. I know I said I gave this slide last month as well. I think I'll just make a little point there on the end, is that I've worked for many years with many water agencies adopting 218 fees, and I've gone through the Prop 26 regulatory fees too. And a Prop 26 fee, you still have just as much opportunity as the public to come and speak and be heard. The 218 process, yes, it has a protest procedure, but it's very, very rare that there's sufficient protests to make a difference in stopping a board from taking action. They might stop because they hear your voices and understand your displeasure. But the 26 fee provides just as much opportunity for people to come and be heard. Okay, Indigo, I think this is the last slide here on this subject, and it shows the fee study timeline from here on out. So we are in February right now. I'm going to be presenting the draft fee structure next, and then in March we will hold a public workshop with the public again. But this time we will be explaining the draft fee structure, and then we'll be reviewing that with the TAC for their input, coming back to the board in April. And in June, that's when the hearing would be held, and the board would entertain the motion to adopt a fee resolution. And then the fee could be in place. It gets put on the tax rolls in August. There are some people who will be directly billed. Those bills would go out in the fall as well. Okay.
Okay, any questions from board members or comments? Any questions or comments from the audience? If so, please come forward and address the mic. I don't know if it's working. We'll find out. State your name for the record, too. They're not working.
Testing, testing. Thank you for being flexible.
Yeah, my name is Chuck Vaugh. My questions are regarding the benefit you talked about in one of those, and then also the protest. I guess the mechanism for a protest. So first off, I guess you have some experience with protests regarding fees, and there's not some identifier that before you even set these fees on everyone, that everybody has to protest individually, per property owner or per entity or whatever. Okay. Based on my conversations with legal counsel Mark Del Perro, there's a lot of these areas in this valley that are not benefiting by this. They don't impact it and they don't benefit, but they are in fact in it. And I think that I guess we can all go through that process. It would be better for you to identify that ahead of time so that we don't have to do that, so it doesn't cause other issues that it would probably cause. But that would be my suggestion. Do you have many in your different representations of different areas? Do you have many people that their protests are in fact valid, or not very often?
It's very rare. The highest protest rate I've ever seen on a project I've worked on has been about 23%, and you need a 50% plus one protest in order to stop a board from moving ahead with a fee, if you follow that Proposition 218 fee.
Okay, well, that's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room who cares to weigh in on this? Is there anyone online? Okay, well, I guess we are done with this. Sorry. We're done with the presentation. Now we're ready to request a motion to approve the Proposition 26B pathway.
Move to approve the Prop 26 pathway.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. I think we're ready for a roll call vote.
Okay, Director Crane.
Aye.
Director Gasca.
Aye.
Director Navarez is absent. Director McNerlin. Director White.
Aye.
And Chair McCordy.
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, now we're going to move on to the draft fee structure.
I'm going to make one brief comment before Catherine gets started. I fully anticipate that there will be a lot of comments or questions during this particular part of the agenda. Catherine has a lot of material to cover, and we're a little bit ahead of schedule. So in order to make this the most efficient and productive as possible to have questions and comments be answered, please refrain from interrupting or jumping in. Let Catherine go through a slide, and then please pose a question by raising your hand. Same thing applies for those online with a question. Please type that into the chat, and we'll do our best to accommodate everyone's questions and comments. And with that, I will pass it off to Catherine.
Thank you. Okay, so we are going to discuss the draft fee structure. Let's get going. So in this presentation, I'm going to cover the following: the key considerations shaping the fee structure development, the proposed fee structure, and looking at who does the GSA serve, looking at groundwater extraction by customer group, determining the costs allocated to each customer group, presenting you with the fee calculation methodology. I'm going to talk about appeals and adjustments, the cost basis, and finally, the draft calculated fees. So the expectation for this presentation is that we are really focusing on the fee structure. We are not focusing today on the cost basis. I think that there will be a desire to go down that road and talk a lot about the cost basis, but I really ask that we focus on the fee structure itself. The cost basis can be altered, changed over the next few months, and the fee calculations can fall out from whatever that cost basis is. So please understand that there is time and ability for changing the cost basis, but what we really want to dial in is this fee structure. Today we're asking the board for discussion and direction. We're not asking for a motion and decision on this fee structure. But as you'll understand when I go through this presentation, we are really looking for direction on two key decision points that are in the fee structure. And I'll mention them now so that you are thinking about them and sort of hone in on them as I go along. The first one is whether there is a base fee or not a base fee. And then the second one is how to treat legal cannabis growers in the fee structure.
And just to touch on the cost basis point, at the TAC meeting coming up in March, I fully anticipate that the TAC will want to dig into some of the technical aspects of the cost basis in those projects, which we will have discussions on that where we have time allowed. So there will be opportunity to discuss that more as well at that meeting.
Okay. Put this out there in big, bold red letters. Please know all the numbers that are presented today are draft, and they could change in either direction. They could go up, they could go down. All right, so we'll start out with some of the key considerations that are shaping this fee structure development. I have touched on this in prior meetings, but how is the best fee determined for a particular area? And it really comes down to what is your available, reliable data? What does your customer base say? What do they think? What are the resource capabilities of the GSA and the participating agencies upon which it relies to charge a fee? and then also legal guidance as well. And as the fee study has gone along, we have taken into consideration this demonstration of a reasonable relationship between the charge and the benefit received, the disparities in ability to pay, and language and cultural barriers. So some of the input that we received from our stakeholders is to use the best information possible to imitate extraction of groundwater in the fee structure, rather than having an actual extraction fee, to find a way to imitate that. Second, to consider having a base fee for every parcel within the basin. Third, to consider a fee for cannabis growers. Then, to the maximum extent practicable, capture groundwater extraction in the basin that benefits properties outside of the basin in the fee. And finally, if possible, to minimize work for the Auditor Controller's Office. So, common themes we heard. Please minimize the GSA's budget to fund only those SGMA-required activities. The fee that is adopted should have the least amount of financial impact on the community. And that all water users should pay the fee, regardless of the water source used. What we heard about that is that there's an inability to separate groundwater and surface water distinctly, and this is documented in the GSP. We also heard all parcels with wells should pay the fee. In the sort of legal terminology, that's called regulating the de minimis users. We heard there's support for a parcel/acreage type of fee structure, again, not to have an extraction-based fee. And we had a preference for the fee to be collected via the property tax bill. The logic being, sort of, we're all in it together, everybody should see it on their property tax bill. We'll start out with available data. We'll start out with well inventory data. What we found is that that is not reliable. We were able to put the data that is available onto a map and see where the wells are that are known. We find some issues with multiple records for one well from the state, for example, so we don't really know which dot is the true well. We are sure that we do not have all of the wells because they're not all recorded in a publicly available database. And certainly there's domestic wells that are not recorded and not available in any sort of file from the county. So we have a real issue with knowing where all the wells are, how many there are of them, and which parcel exactly they belong to. With the exception of the public water systems, that's PWS, the extraction data is not reliable, and it is extremely cumbersome to discern. So in one of our stakeholder meetings, there was an agricultural representative there who said, I extract from 4 different water sources on paper from my well. So how to know exactly how much is coming from each source. And in addition to that, even though on paper it says that a certain water source is extracted, the science isn't all there to actually say that that truly is the type of water that was extracted. What we have found in looking at the best data that we have to work with is that the GSP and the annual reports provide the best estimates of agricultural water extraction at this time, and that the GSP provides a very good starting point for data for some of the other groundwater extraction, and there is potential to augment on that data through the fee study, provided it's using reputable data sources. We can obtain parcel data and characteristics about parcels from the Mendocino assessor, but we know that the data is not perfect. We've done a lot of spot checking, ground truthing with parcels, and we know that it's not the economic activity that's taking place on a parcel is not necessarily exactly how it is being characterized by the assessor's office. And finally, when we're looking specifically on the agricultural side and we're looking at cropland, we can identify cropland using a combination of the Department of Water Resources crop mapping data. We also have the Mendocino assessors data, and we have the Mendocino County cannabis license data to assist us with that. So one of the goals is really trying to keep the administration costs of this legally defensible fee as low as possible. And then we really want to avoid exceptions in the fee calculations to keep the administration as simple and as low cost as possible. I do administer fees for 2 other GSAs in the state. And you start getting exceptions, it becomes very challenging. Well, not challenging, but time consuming. It adds more cost to the GSA to have the fees administered. We heard loud and clear from the customers that they don't want to be providing additional data to the GSA every year to calculate their fee. So we looked for data that is obtainable from sources that have already collected that data and either published it or can publish a special report, free, I should add, from the state. And that can also be readily updated every year. So we have Mendocino County, Department of Water Resources, the California Public Utilities Commission, and GSA annual reports. So those are all sources of data we can get every year that can be updated free of charge. And finally, the water providers do not have the resources to provide the annual database of assessor parcel numbers, that's APN served, and the number of connections. So there was one idea for a fee structure that we thought might be a good one, but at this time, we don't have the information to do that. So, and I will, many of the things I'm just mentioning now will really be brought more to light as I go through this presentation. I do want you to know that the GSA has legal guidance specific to the fee structure. The legal staff person has been attending internal meetings, and opinion is available at all of these board and tech meetings. If you have any questions for the legal team, they're here to answer your questions. All right, so in this picture, what I'm trying to show you is all these sort of competing interests in trying to come up with a fee structure. I mean, first of all, the fee structure has to be defensible, and it has to provide financial stability to the GSA. But we're also trying to weigh in equity between customers, being able to enforce it on an equitable basis, having something that's reasonably simple and that people understand. So kind of, if you're looking at this triangle, I'm trying to thread the needle right down there where all those numbers are, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And when you have so many things that you're trying to accomplish, there's usually some give and take. So there's usually something in a fee structure that maybe doesn't quite reach the goal that you wanted to reach in one of these areas, but it reaches another one fairly well. And it might be that way for some customer groups feel like it's hit the mark with equity, and some others might feel it doesn't, but it works because it has simplicity. So keep in mind that what we've really tried to do is listen to people and know parameters of what we can do, and try to thread that line there in the triangle. When I presented to you back in October of 2023, I had told you, once the fee pathway had been selected, that I would provide you with 3 different fee structures and that you would be asked to participate in a ranking exercise. And from that, we would determine which was the most favorable fee structure, had the greatest consensus, and that really hasn't happened. Based on the stakeholder input and the data availability that I've found and the limitations with the data availability, what I've done is I've developed one fee structure. It's a hybrid type of fee structure. I'll explain that. But it has some decision points in it, and certainly has areas within it that can be tweaked, and that over time can be morphed if that's what's needed. There are some fee structures that were eliminated. First off, the wellhead fee concept. There's just insufficient data to be applying that in an equitable manner throughout the valley. Second of all, the idea of a parcel fee. So a parcel fee is when every parcel, regardless of size or what is happening on that parcel, pays the same fee. That was a possibility, but instead of having a parcel fee, we favored using an acreage fee because that has a stronger linkage to the benefits of the GSA's activities. That's based on the acreage and the interconnection of surface water and groundwater in various parts of the basin. And third, we had looked into having a connection fee. This would just be for the users that are connected to a municipal system. That type of fee structure has been used elsewhere quite successfully, but we found this to be less robust than extraction for the municipal users. Extraction is used in the GSP model. We have got those numbers from the state, and so we have readily available data for that for those customers. Okay. I'm going to pause right now if anyone has any questions.
Board members?
All right.
We were talking about cannabis growers. Indoor, outdoor, I know because there's some very, very large indoor. So I know that I think there was 22 that aren't through the licensed program or something. I think I saw on one slide. So
yeah, I'll address that. So only looking at legal cannabis growers that have a license with the county. They can be indoor or outdoor growers. They have a different kind of license from the county. All right, well, let's go into the proposed fee structure. All right, so this is a hybrid fee structure proposed, meaning that not everybody is paying the fee in exactly the same way. And I do have a note there on the side that the Proposition 26 fee requires what they call regulation of de minimis uses. This is something that many GSAs have done. It is a resolution that the GSA board adopts that states how they are regulating domestic wells, and so the fee is applicable to them. It's a step in the implementation process, but it is a step that has been done many times by other GSAs. First of all, at the top of this chart, it says all fee group parcels. This is optional. One of the decision points in the fee structure is whether to have a base fee or not. If there was a base fee, that means that all parcels with acreage inside of the GSA basin boundaries would pay something, each year for the running of the GSA. This would be a fee per acre, and it's a flat fee, meaning that it doesn't differ based on land use or where you are in the basin or the types of, I already said land use. So it's the same fee per acre across the basin boundaries, with the exception of those fee parcels that are fee exempt. The fee parcels that are fee exempt are federal parcels and federal parcels held in trust for tribal lands. So that's that first group. That first grouping is all parcels within the GSA. That would be a fee that gets placed on the property tax bill each year. There are some property owners that do not pay property taxes. So for those particular parcels, they would receive a bill annually from the GSA directly. That bill would go out probably, usually it's done about the same time as the property tax roll gets finished in August these bills would probably go out in September. Then there's fee group 1. This is the public water systems. This group would pay per 1,000 gallons extracted, as reported to the state, on a 5-year rolling average. And I'm going to go into depth on all of this, so don't worry if you're not catching it this time around. Those bills to the public water systems would be sent at the same time as those direct bills go out to the property owners who do not pay property taxes, so probably September. Fee group 2, this is cropland. This is a flat fee per acre for all of the acreage of a parcel. If the parcel has any portion of the parcel within the GSA boundaries. It is a flat fee, meaning that it doesn't matter if you grow grapes or pears, or you're growing hay, or truck crop, whatever you're growing, everybody would pay the same fee. And the fee is, I lost my train of thought there a little bit. Is applied to all acres of the parcel, I said that. Fee group 3, this is homes and businesses that are not in fee groups 1 or 2. And these are identified as properties that have improvements on them. So the assessor's database contains information on whether the parcel has a structure on it and what the value is of the structure. So if there is a structure with a value on the property, the assumption is that there is economic activity taking place on that parcel. So there are homes. These tend to be more, well, the vast majority of them they're rural residential. So these are properties outside of the municipal boundaries, and they could range anywhere from less than an acre to 20-odd acres, for example. So for those rural residential properties, those would be capped at half an acre each. The reason being that the economic activity taking place on those parcels and the water use on those parcels is highly unlikely to be at anything more than half an acre. It's going to be a home. It might be a garden, maybe a few fruit trees, or perhaps a secondary unit on the property, for example. Businesses are also in fee group 3. That could be, for example, you could have a mill that is outside of a water district boundary, so it's not served by a public water system. There's restaurants in that category. There's all kinds of different businesses in that category. And then fee group 4 is all other property. And this fee group would not pay a fee group fee. They would only pay a base fee if there is a base fee. And I'll explain a little bit more on that as we go along too. Okay. All right, so these are the annual fee setting steps. Really explains the methodology of the proposed fee structure. So step 1, determine the customer base, and I'm going to go through each of these steps too. Step 2, estimate the groundwater extraction by each of the customer groups. Step 3, calculate the cost that's to be paid by that customer group. Step 4, calculate the base fee. Again, this is optional. Step 5, then you calculate the customer group fees. Okay? All right, so step 1, we're answering the question, who does the GSA serve? So I've identified that there are these 4 different fee groups, these 4 different groupings of customers that the GSA is serving. Whenever you create a fee like this, you really have to define what each customer group is. So the definition of a public water system, this is the easier one. We can take that from the California Safe Drinking Water Act. So public water system means a system for the provision of water for human consumption through pipes or construction conveyances that has 15 or more service connections or regularly serves at least 25 individuals daily, at least 60 days out of the year. We have 10 state-regulated water systems in the basin and 1 Public Utility Commission-regulated water system. That one is Regina Water Company, and then we have the other 10 state-regulated water systems. Okay. Group 2, called cropland. So this definition is being created by the fee study, and it is being defined as land that meets any one of the following characterizations. First of all, it has an assessor's land use code for irrigated agriculture. There are 4 land use codes that the assessor uses to identify these properties. Number 41 is orchard, 42 is vineyard, 43 is permanent pasture, and 44 is row crops. There's actually only 1 row crop parcel in the basin. Second is the Department of Water Resources identified cropland. Department of Water Resources contracts with a company called Land IQ, and through various means, which I don't fully understand, I believe it's aerial imagery, satellite imagery, ground truthing, and something else. They have 4 methodologies by which they do this. But they identify cropland, and DWR publishes that information. There's a little bit of a lag on it. It'll be about 2 years old, but they do have that available. So we put that in onto the map that we create. And then finally, as I'd mentioned, this is optional, that land that is legally growing cannabis with a medium or a large or a nursery stock license be included in cropland. Okay. Group 3. I'm sorry, yes, I have this. Okay, so when we talked about this concept of cropland with some stakeholders, a question was asked, well, what about this difference between dry and irrigated farming? We know that there are properties that are dry farming in the Ukiah Basin, and particularly with grapes and pears. The problem is that we have no consistent data source to distinguish a property that is dry farming. The 2020 DWR cropping map does not provide this detail. And it's 2020 data because that is the most recent publication that is available for free from the Department of Water Resources. The 2010 cropping map does distinguish it, but that data is 13 years old, and it does not agree with the assessor's records. So we have a problem here between different data sources, and how do we truly know if a parcel is being dry farmed or not, or perhaps a portion of a parcel is dry farmed and a portion has irrigation. So let's go to the next slide, which has a map. And I'm trying to illustrate the issue here. So the yellow colored parcels, they are identified as dry farmed according to the assessor's records. The red hatching is what that 2010 database says is dry farmed. And then what you see in purple, mostly purple, there's some other shades there, but purple is grapes, so grape blandage, they're shown in purple. That's what the 2020 database tells us, but doesn't tell us if it's dry or if it's being irrigated. So some parcels, the information seems to line up quite nicely, but for other parcels, do we have a red? Can I do that?
Indigo is always prepared.
Oh, great, thank you. All right, so it's this one? No, which one is it? Yeah, that's what I tried. Oh, maybe I'm just not pressing. Oh, I wasn't pointing it right. Okay, so here's this yellow parcel down here. Says it's dry farmed according to the assessor. The 2010 data says, well, maybe a tiny little piece of it is. 2020 data doesn't tell us anything. Over here, the data seems to line up fairly nicely. This is a dry farmed parcel according to the assessor, and it's dry farmed according to the 2010 data. Then we have information over here that there's a dry farmed portion of a parcel here, but the 2020 data suggests there's no farming happening there at all. So that's the difficulty. That's why in the cropland fee group, there's no distinguishing between different types of crops that are being grown or how they're being grown. Yes, Eric.
There's a question from Laurel Marcus, which I will read out loud. The county agricultural commissioner has annual records of what crops are grown on each parcel. There are many parcels which are very large, 150 to 200 acres, but only 10 to 20 acres are irrigated agriculture. Why not use the ag commissioner's records to determine cropland/parcel and only levy the fee on the acreage of the actual cropland, not the entire parcel, similar in approach to how rural residential is treated?
So, okay, let me try and break that down a little bit. The Agriculture Commissioner's data, there could be some good data there. I have tried to use Agricultural Commissioner data in the past, but was unable to match it successfully with APNs. It is true that this fee structure would apply the fee across all acreage, even if only a portion of a parcel is actually farmed. So the way the fee structure is trying to mimic the use of groundwater is through the first step of the cost allocation between the customer groups. Then the entire customer group is paying on a level playing field once that's been done. So I think it's worth looking at the Agricultural Commissioner's data, certainly, and see if there's something we can do with that. But the idea is that we just don't have precision. We don't have precision, so why try to make something that is very complicated and that is very disputable when we can create a fee structure we know is not perfect, but at least treats everybody in the same manner? Yes, Teresa.
Can't you have them just self-report?
If you have people self-report, you have to then set up some kind of enforcement activity, because you would want to make sure that people are actually self-reporting honestly.
I really support the concept that the people who use water pay, and I use my own place as an example. So I have 32 acres. Part of that's under the Russian River because my property line goes to the middle of the Russian River. Part of that is riparian forest, which I can't touch for cropland, not that I ever would. Part of that is floodway, which I also can't utilize. Part of it is houses. but if you go on this, on your basis, I'd pay the same fee as 32 acres on Ruddock Cunningham Road, where people have great wells, unlimited use of water, and certainly have a competitive advantage over me to produce a crop. So I think that equity is a really important part of this, and I can see a base fee that everybody pays, as you say, but at some point there has to be a factor that looks at who gets the benefits from the ability to pump. And if these, I know in discussions with RCRC and their staff that if there's a sense of inequity around the state with these across-the-board fees, there will be meters on pumps.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So just to address this and thinking ahead a little bit too, as Catherine pointed out on that one diagram where you're balancing equity, reasonableness, et cetera, to Catherine's point, because we have data limitations, what Catherine has been working really hard on, and I really appreciate all the work that her team has been doing on this, is trying to find the most defensible, reasonable structure that we can roll with right now. But that does not mean that in the future, between now and in the future, we could improve and iterate on this fee structure and revise it and improve it over time. That is the nature of fee studies, as I recall, Catherine, that it's not always going to be perfect, but we know where the data gaps are, and we can work to fill in those gaps, which is part of what we want to do as the GSA in general, right? For not only our periodic evaluation and improving our data gaps that we know are there and we know what they are, but also to use that data to improve our fee structure to bring in better equity in the future. So the main thing I just want everyone to keep in mind is that there's not going to be a perfect solution, but we can strive to improve upon it over time, and that is something that most GSAs are actively doing as well. This is a challenge for quite a few people. Yes, Director White.
The thing that comes back to me is this fee study wasn't cheap. It cost a fair amount of money. And it did an excellent job of showing that the kind of data that you want to make a finer delineation of utility to an individual or an individual acre is difficult to get and will cost a fair amount of money. And whatever it costs has to be paid by this fee. So the simpler this thing is, the broader the brush, the less it's going to cost everyone. If we try to get into, well, what about this and what about that? Sure, we can get into that, and we could spend $400,000 or $500,000 getting that kind of stuff just like right there. And everybody's just going to pay $400,000 or $500,000. Maybe one guy will, hey, well, I got out of a bit of that, but I'm not interested. I'm interested in keeping this thing as cheap as possible, so the fees are as low as possible and as simple as possible to understand.
There's a comment from Beth from Russian River Flood Control asking the board to consider that land use can change and groundwater can be pumped and trunked off property. And as Catherine mentioned, regulating can be costly and time consuming. Thank you, Beth, for your comment. With that, can we do one more question and then continue on with the presentation? Director Gasca?
Yeah, I was just going to point out, with grapes, even if they're quote dry farmed, if they're not irrigated in the summer, about 99% of everybody uses it for frost protection. So they're still using water regardless.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, sorry. I was thinking I was in control for a moment there. Indigo, could you go to the next slide? Thank you very much. Okay, so I want to talk about cannabis cropland again. This is optional for the board. I looked at this because I was asked to look at this by stakeholders. So there are using, now I have the November version from the Mendocino County, and it may have changed a little since then, but the number of parcels in total with cannabis growing licenses that are in the medium, large, or nursery/stock seed categories is 50 of those. 28 of those already fall into the definition of cropland using the assessors for land use codes and using the DWR definition. There are 22 parcels that could be classified as cropland if you chose to include them. And I show the acreage there too, so you can get an idea of the total acreage of these properties. Next slide. So just talk a little bit about the characteristics of a cannabis growing property in the fee study groupings that we have. So they are like other smaller agricultural harvests. They can be grown indoors or outdoors. Think about things like nursery crops and berries. Many of these properties, already mentioned this, are classified as cropland because they're growing something else. But I think an interesting consideration is that the county issues business licenses for growing cannabis. So unlike agricultural products like pears and grapes, which you can grow without a business license, they're a little different. So the question came up, should these additional 22 properties really be treated as cropland if you do include them? Or should they really be fee group 3? So I looked a little bit more in depth into that. I have a couple of comments here. So not all of the 22 properties have an improvement value per the assessor. So it's a little odd because there are structures on them. You can see them by aerial photography. And they do get charged a structure value by the auditor controller, but there is no record of a structure value in the assessor's records, which is what I'm using for the fee database. So without an improvement value, then a cannabis growing parcel will go to fee group 4, which means they don't pay anything. And that might be just fine. I just want to point that out as something to think about. Okay?
Wait,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but
Go ahead.
somebody who's growing acres and acres of cannabis and using tons of water could pay nothing? That'd be fine?
Well, I'll start out with saying they really don't grow acres and acres. So they get a license and they have a maximum canopy that they can grow. And I know Glenn knows the details a little bit better than I do here, but they are fairly small in size. But yes, that's what the last point is saying. So if they weren't classified as cropland, then there's a few parcels that then would go to that 0 fee group 4.
Yeah, the largest they can grow is 10,000 square feet for the large permits, which is a 1/4 acre. So it's not acres and acres. Those 20 people at max are going to be 5 acres total.
Doesn't cannabis use quite a bit of water, though? That was my understanding. That's why they're diverting from the rivers, and our entire environment's a little bit screwed because it's the illegal cannabis grows.
So we're only talking legal people here.
I know,
and
but I'm just saying they use water.
They do use water, and that goes back to my issue about, okay, cannabis, technically speaking, is commerce, it's not agriculture. That's the way that the state laws are designed. They're not considered to be an agricultural user, but they do use water. So having done a little research on this, there's about 185 permits in Redwood Valley and Ukiah Valley. I can't say that all of them, in fact, I know not all of them are inside of the GSA, but based on communications I've had with Dr. Ted Grantham at UC Berkeley, we figure that they are probably using somewhere in the neighborhood of about 0.25 to 1 acre foot to 2 acre feet per acre. I'm sorry, let me restate that. It's 1 to 2 acre feet per acre. 10,000 square feet is approximately 1/4 of an acre, so you can figure that there's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 0.2 to 0.5 acre feet. And when you add all that together, that is about 46 to 120 acre feet for the legal licenses that are inside of Redwood Valley, Ukiah Valley. So how does that compare? So with wine grapes, we're using about 1 acre-foot per acre max with frost protection and what we irrigate to grow the crop. So it's not a big number. But going back to my idea that everybody who pumps groundwater or uses it should pay. So they need to be included somehow, but again, equitably. And that's the whole thing. If you pump
True, I
groundwater.
just don't want the mom and dad with 2 kids paying more in a house or an apartment because they're going to get this fee somehow through their rent or whatever, right? Pay more than somebody who's making money off of their water.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they should be considered just as cropland. I mean, they're using more than grapes, probably something comparable to pears. And, well, and they shouldn't be penalized for the illegal people who aren't paying anything.
Al.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's a small piece of the crop world, the water world. So, again, costs, how much will it cost us to try to separate this out and deal with it as a separate item versus have the broad brush, and they're in there. If we do a base fee, which I strongly recommend, then nobody is left out. Everyone is in there. And then we have these other systems, the public water systems, cropland, that sort of thing that tries to sort of balance it for these other considerations. But I really want to get away from cutting blocks. We need blocks. Save the money. Everyone benefits.
Just one more comment from, did you have something, Director McNally? Or
Go ahead.
I don't know who's calling on me, the chair or you at this point. Okay,
calling on you.
I just want to say that as you go through the packet later on in the presentation, the base fee works out to be like $4 per acre, right, or something. And then if you look at, for instance, I looked at Rogenics, that's where I fall. My Regina fee would be about $60-something, right? So so yes, we want a base, but at the same time, we want to spread it out, but we have to have some kind of equity because this is not a great economic time to be throwing fees on people.
I think, Teresa, what I'm hearing from the board is that cannabis should be considered in this fee. Maybe we don't know exactly if it's right as it is. I'll wait for more direction from you on that. Okay.
For the sake of time, we would like to proceed forward. But one quick comment from Laurel before we move on. Laurel pointed out and asked the question, will you adopt the pathway to equity so a landowner has the ability to challenge the acres they are being assessed for? For example, the large land holdings can demonstrate how many acres they are farming and have their assessment revised.
So actually I addressed that in a future slide. So I'm going to get to that slide and I'll respond to that question.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this was an example, I hadn't quite finished this. I wanted to show, so in yellow, that's one parcel. I know it's a weird shape, but that is one parcel. So this is legal, has a legal cannabis license. And this particular parcel would already be counted as cropland because it has, as you can see in purple, it has already got other crops being grown on the parcel. Let's go to the next slide. But this is an example where a property could be in group 2, group 3, or even group 4, depending on whether it has an improvement on it per the assessor's records. This is not cropland. The parcel is not cropland under any other definition. So this would be added to the cropland database. Okay. All right, so fee group 3. This definition is also being created by the fee study as an improved property, meaning it has an improvements value as shown on the property tax bill for structures located on the property, but that has to come from the assessor's database, not the auditor controllers. This property is not served by a public water system. It could be served by a state small water system. There are 2 state small water systems within the GSA, so they are included in here. These properties are not identified as cropland. As I already mentioned, they might be rural residential, they could be commercial, industrial, or institutional uses. There's 1 institutional. So capped the rural residential to the area in which we think is a reasonable area for economic activity to be taking place. There's no cap on the commercial, industrial, or institutional parcels. They tend to use a much larger portion, most of their parcel acreage for their activity that they're conducting. Okay, fee group 4.
Before you leave fee group 3, I wanted to bring up the idea that you have a very large water user in Mendocino Forest Products who have wells that they're using a substantial amount of water. So how are they going to be treated?
I can't tell that. I have no idea what they're using. There's no records available to me. Yes, you could go down this self-reporting route, and other GSAs have, but you're creating a tremendous amount of work to do that. Some GSAs think it's worth the tremendous amount of work up front, and then, it will get easier over time. You are quite different in the fact that you have many different types of land uses and different topography within your basin. And so it's been quite a challenge. My own opinion is that if you were to go down this self-reporting route, it would cost a lot in consultants to set that up. And I think that you would, I'm not sure how long it would take to really get a great database. Because if people self-report, by and large, people are honest, I know that. But you would have to have some kind of enforcement activity taking place. You would have to check that people are reporting correctly. Okay, sorry, before we go to fee group 3, I did want to just address this rural residential and the capping. And I just wanted to show you in this slide, it's not great, but these types of properties, they can be less than 1 acre, but they can be 10, 20 acres. Here's an area where we've got quite a lot of these rural residential properties, but you can see a large part of their property is just wooded land. There's nothing going on in that property. So again, just explaining why it's capped at half an acre. Okay, let's go to fee group 4. So this is all other. This land is located outside of the water service provider boundaries. The only economic activity occurring or presumed to be occurring may be for raising livestock or perhaps for some kind of recreational or cultural purpose. Some examples include, I think, rangeland is the one big one, vacant land. We might have an undeveloped lot, for example, right-of-way, and utilities properties. So we're still on step 1. So step 1 then is creating this master database to apply the fee each year. What it means is each year you will be updating the GIS layers. This is the assessor parcel data, the most recently available DWR cropland map, the water provider boundaries, and the most recent version of the county cannabis license holder parcels. From that map, the federally owned parcels and the tribal lands held in trust by the federal government are removed because they are exempt. And then every fee-paying parcel gets sorted into one of those 4 fee-paying groups. What's kind of good about it, low cost about it, is that the GIS consultant will deliver an Excel file of all the parcels and all of the characteristics, and then by using various criteria within Excel, you can easily sort each parcel into one of those 4 fee-paying groups. So it's just about, it's just half a day's worth of work to do that. Okay. I think next slide, please. Okay. Step 2. This is where the groundwater extraction is estimated by customer group. Fee group 1, public water systems. This is not estimated, this is reported. We actually know these numbers. They are reported to the state. Regina also reports to the Public Utilities Commission, so you can, I did a comparison check, yes, everything is the same. So we have our 11 public water systems. As I said, we have the data. There's no estimating involved with that. Fee group 2 is the cropland. We are estimating their groundwater use, and I'll go into more detail on this. Same with fee groups 3, and then fee group 4, no, there's no estimating because they're not using, or at least we presume they're not using groundwater. Next slide. Okay, so for the 3 groups that we're estimating the groundwater extraction, group 1, this will be the groundwater extraction data that they filed for the last year with Department of Water Resources. It's on a calendar year. Now, there are public water systems in the basin that also serve agricultural connections, and we need to remove that extraction from this group because we don't want to be charging them twice. We don't want them to get a bill from both their water provider and from this cropland fee as well. So this is an estimate, but we do deduct that agricultural use from the total extraction. Group 2, we're estimating the extraction by agriculture using the GSA's annual report. So it's a 5-year rolling average extraction using both the GSP and the annual reports for now, and then over time it will become just the GSA annual reports. And we add the water use from the agricultural connections from group 1, and optionally add an estimated extraction for cannabis. It is assumed that cannabis extraction is groundwater. We have no way of knowing exactly how much of that groundwater, how much of that water, A, it's an estimate on the total amount of water used, and then B, there's just no way of telling if it's all from groundwater, partially from groundwater. We don't exactly know.
I think they have to report to Department of Water Resources.
They do?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it seemed really high. I mean, their rate is the equivalent of 4 acre-feet per acre per year. Mm-hmm. And then the nursery is 8 acre-feet, which is, I mean, that's 3 times more than you need to grow rice. I just don't know where they would put the water.
Okay, so we'll investigate that. Okay, we'll have a look. And then I think the question is, if they do report it, is it worth going through that effort and obtaining that information or not? So that's another thing to keep in mind.
I would think not. I mean, looking at, even if we assume that the 75 acre-feet is right, that out of the entire agricultural cropland use, they're 1%.
Correct. Yes. And I would say, given the imprecision with which we are estimating the total cropland water use, that it'll...
Like back to Alice, it's a
yes.
broad brush.
It is, yes. And then group 3, this group's water use is estimated, but it's estimated using local data. So the Millview County Water District provided their 2023 water meter reads to me for all of their customers so that I could perform an analysis and look at the average water use per acre for different categories. So I did that for residential, commercial, industrial, and institutional. So that's good local data, and that's what's used to estimate their water usage. Okay. All right, Indigo. So I know this table is a little bit hard to see on screen here. Hopefully it's a little easy to see in your packet. But this table summarizes the prior slide explaining the groundwater extraction for each of these 3 groups. I'll focus a little bit here on group 2 with the agricultural cropland. I had just said that, again, this is not super precise. What I'm using is what I believe is the best data available. and that is what has been developed for the GSP. It's called the IDC model. It's for the GSP, and that has an estimate of total water use and what is groundwater use, what is surface water use by the agricultural customers group. So that's what I'm using. Also, you can see here in crop 2, my pointer, here in crop 2, this is an estimate for cannabis. It's 75 acre-feet for the year, but that's out of a total of over 7,000 acre-feet. So it's really a very, very small piece. Including cannabis as cropland has minimal effect on the fee, really minimal effect on the fee. It's more the philosophy, I believe, of what you think is the right thing to do. And like I said before, the reason why we even looked into it is because people felt like we heard from stakeholders that it was at least should be looked at. So then the total estimated groundwater use here, based on the most recent 5-year rolling average information we have, is 10,000, and my eyes are failing, is it 6,000? 10,600 acre-feet. All right, let's go to the next slide and just talk a little bit more about a couple of these categories. So the cannabis extraction group, I have used a paper that stated that that plants use about 6 gallons per plant per day, and I did all the math. I used the maximum canopy that's allowable by the county code to determine the water use per year for the licenses, put that in gallons, and then put it into acre-feet. And, I think the literature is not rock solid on this. We know that there's a range of water use, and I am happy to, as data gets better, right? Each year, data gets better. You can update these types of things, pieces of the fee, each year. So if some better data source becomes available, we'll use that instead. For now, I use that. I did look at many papers on cannabis extraction, and they're just inconclusive. It sounds like there's been some recent studies that give us a bit better bracket, and so we might fine-tune this a little bit between now and April. But for now, we'll just say that 75 acre-feet, as you just saw in the last table, it's really a drop in the bucket compared with cropland as a whole. Let's go to the next slide, because there's one more I wanted to mention. The group 3, just talk about this a little bit more, because on the slide before, I just shown that 0.83 acre-feet per acre for the whole group, but in estimating the groundwater extraction, I am actually doing it by each of the categories: residential, commercial, industrial, etc. And then I do that average calculation just to make it a little easier in the other table. But so they're estimated to use a little over 300 acre-feet per year, and also no precision on this. Couldn't say for certain if they're using groundwater or if they're using surface water, but that is true for all of these groups. So I do assume that it's all groundwater. Okay, next slide. Okay, I think it's only natural to ask, why do these extraction estimates differ from the GSP? And the GSP really provided the best estimates of groundwater use under a constrained timeline. So we know that there are data gaps in it, and they will be addressed in the 2027 periodic evaluation. They do provide here just a couple of reasons why these numbers are different. First of all, I'm reporting all the groundwater extraction from all of the public water systems. The GSP doesn't have quite all of those. I'm including cannabis water use, and I'm including Group 3 fee customers. Those properties and water use are not included in the GSP. And then one other thing was it was kind of a blip. So the 2021 annual report had higher groundwater use estimates than had been in all those historical estimates in the GSP. And because I'm using a 5-year rolling average, that gets included in the average, so it makes the numbers higher than you see in the GSP.
So, this is a little aside, but this is a lot of work that went into this. This is sort of a refined collection of data based in excess of what we did when we had our GSP put together. So as we have to update our GSP, this becomes material that could be used, so we're not having to like do it over again kind of thing. So there's an additional value to this for us. Okay, thanks, that was it.
Yes. No, I just want to reiterate again that the answer is yes. This is value add by Catherine and her team. And again, they've put in a tremendous amount of effort to do the best job possible. And I really appreciate all the effort.
All right, next slide, Indigo. Thank you. So step 3 is to determine the costs to be paid by each customer group. This is nice and simple math we have here. So we use the board-approved cost basis, and that might be adjusted each year. You might adjust it, and I would recommend you have an automatic inflator, but I also recommend that you look at your budget for the next year and determine how well that aligns with your automatic inflator, and see where you're at, because you may find that you need to alter your cost basis. With a Prop 26 fee, you can do that. It's not like with the 218 where you've set a schedule for 5 years. So if you need to adjust it, you can. You can be upwards or downwards from what that automatic inflator would be. And then you're going to multiply the board-approved cost basis by the share of groundwater extraction for each of these 3 groups. So as the estimates currently are, Group 1 would pay for 31% of the total cost for the year. Group 2 would pay 66%, and Group 3 would pay 3%. Yes, Teresa.
What percentage will we build because we can't do it on the tax rolls or directly to the public water? Because I think that kind of has to be baked in as being delinquent. Because there's no incentive at all to pay a bill that has no consequence when you don't pay it.
Yeah, so in total, it's somewhere between 3 and 4% of all bills. I'm not including the public water systems, but if just looking at the property tax bills, there's about 4% of them that have to be direct billed that can't go on the property taxes. And then as far as delinquencies go, that is baked into the cash flow. Okay, next slide. All right, so in this table, I'm illustrating how this would happen fiscal year 2025, cost allocation. So if the cost basis is 1.32 million, we'll talk about that in a little bit. And if there was a base fee, so if there's a base fee, that would be, and we have some discussion on this too coming up. But for now, let's just say it's 11% of that total cost. It's almost 150,000. We could round it if you want it to round. We just say it's 150,000 is in the base fee, and then the remainder gets allocated amongst the 3 groups. And there you can see it's being allocated according to those percentages, the 31, the 66, and the 3%. Okay, next slide. All right, so talk about the base fee. All right, so this is the first sort of big decision point. Should all land within the GSA boundary pay a base fee for the management of groundwater as prescribed by the state? Why might you say yes? Because the GSA is monitoring and evaluating all water sources to continually improve its hydrologic model as environmental conditions change. Use of surface water and other waters cannot be passed out with precision as documented in the GSP. Therefore, All properties within the basin do, to some degree, benefit from the GSA's activities, even if the benefit is not obvious today. Why might you say no? Well, the base fee adds complexity to the fee structure, and it does increase the administration costs because all of those parcels, except those that are exempt, will be charged. So you have to make sure all those parcels that are going to be charged, that it goes onto the property tax bill. For example, Group 4, they would only receive the base fee. It doesn't add much in truth, but that could be one reason why you might not want to do it. Okay. I did look at a couple of different base fee options. Did talk this through with the team. And for the base fee, so how much do you put into the base fee is a very, very valid question, if you have it. And the general consensus was, well, it should be the administration costs because you've got to keep the lights on for the GSA no matter what. You know, you're a mandated entity, so everyone should pay for something, right? Should pay for administrative costs. But even within the administrative costs, there are those administrative costs that are truly day-to-day types of costs, like you have your staff, you have to pay the county for the facilities, you have to hold your public meetings, you have to have legal counsel. Those are all known costs. But you also have some costs that are driven by the PMA. So for example, your contract staff will have to do more work if you are doing more PMA types of activities, meaning you have projects going on where you are engaging with other consultants to perform feasibility studies or running programs. So there are some costs that, yes, they're administrative, but they're also being driven by PMA. I think in your board packet you received a couple of tables that itemize all the costs, and you'll see in there that the PMA-driven costs for administrative activities are separated out from the core costs. And so in talking through that, it's my opinion, and certainly if you disagree, we can certainly change this, is that the base fee should really be reflecting those core administrative costs, the absolute lights-on essentials kinds of costs. So that's how it's been, the model's been developed to date. Second of all, I talked about this a little bit at the beginning, was should that base fee be a parcel fee or an acreage fee? And we went with the acreage fee, again, tying back to the GSP, the modeling, managing the groundwater for all lands in the basin. These are key determinants going into the hydrologic model, has much more relevance and bearing on paying the fee than a parcel fee does. Okay, next slide. All right, so here's the base fee calculation, the total acreage within the GSA boundaries. Now I have allowed for a 5% margin of error with that acreage because it has been my experience before when we pull this database, we're pulling this database from really now from fall of last year. We pull the database again in July when we calculate the fees. So when we pull it in July, there will be some changes, and we want to allow a little bit for human error too. So I have a 5% difference in there. So the actual total acres within the boundary, you can see there's 35,773, but in the calculation I have 33,984. So it's just the base fee allocation divided by the fee paying parcel acreage to determine the fee per acre per year. All right, and then for the customer group fees, Group 1, we're going to divide the allocated cost by the thousands of gallons extracted by Group 1. Group 2, we're going to divide the allocated cost to Group 2 by the total Group 2 acres. Again, we've got this decision point in there. Should the legally growing cannabis properties be included in cropland or not? Group 3, divide the allocated cost by the Group 3 acres, remembering that rural residential has been capped at 0.5 acres. Now, Importantly here, the Group 2 and the Group 3 fees get applied to the entire acreage of the parcel. This includes acreage that may fall outside of the GSA boundary, and the reason being to account for potential export of groundwater from the basin. And I have a couple of slides here with maps that I hope will help illustrate the reasoning behind this. Okay. Oh, I thought this was, is it my next slide? Okay, well, let's go, that's fine. We'll go through it. I think it comes up in Group 2 and Group 3. Okay, so fee Group 1 I did first. This is data from the electronic annual reports that are filed with DWR. This is in thousands of gallons. By the way, they don't all report in the same units. So there is a little bit of work there in making sure everybody's in thousands of gallons. We've got some acre feet in there. No, well, we've definitely got some 100 cubic feet in there. So first of all, get them all into the same units. Take out the amount that's estimated for agricultural extraction. And the way that is done is that each public water system has to report production and consumption. So from the consumption records, we know how many agricultural customers there are and how much water is delivered to those customers. So take that percentage of agricultural customer consumption, of total consumption, and apply that to the extraction. It gives a pretty good estimate. So simple division here. There's no margin of error in this because I'm just using the data straight from the state. But 0.3429 dollars per 1,000 gallons. Next slide. So for each public water system, that cost gets multiplied by their extraction, their 5-year rolling extraction. And so those that, the largest payer there would be the city of Ukiah. But you can see here, even there's some small public water systems there that pay something. Yeah.
So this would just be extraction of groundwater, or of groundwater. This wouldn't include surface water.
Correct. Okay, next slide. Fee Group 2. So I did include cannabis in this example, and I have reduced the acreage here again by 5%, just allowing for that difference in the data pool timing and margin of error as well. So the fee per acre here is $40.42 for the entire parcel acreage. Okay, and then I think this next slide might be where okay, so why charge the entire parcel? So the property could be using groundwater that's extracted from inside the basin on portions of the parcel that are outside of the basin. And we know that the public water systems do this. They extract from within the basin, and they are supplying customers outside of the basin with water. So we know that's happening there. So in an effort to treat all these groups equitably, equally, and equitably, that's why the entire parcel is charged. Okay.
I just want to make a note that that Director Crane has to leave at this time at 3:50 p.m.
Okay. All right. Next slide. And so I just wanted to illustrate this, and I can see you cannot see this very well on the map, but here is River Estates Mutual Water Company. Its territory is in and out of the boundary. You can see that. This red and white line here is the GSA boundary. This portion here is outside of the boundary. These portions here are inside the boundary. Their wells are all clustered here. I don't actually know how many wells there are because this might be one well, it might be 4 wells where 4 dots have been put. I'm not entirely sure. But it's most definitely, their well or wells are most definitely inside the GSA basin. And they are using it to supply customers outside. I have another example. Yeah.
So I want to make a comment on that since it's directly across from my property.
Okay, yeah.
They are using rainy well collectors that are supposed to be in the river, so it's really underflow, and I don't believe that they're using any groundwater per se. So this is considered to be surface water.
Just a comment to that, Chairman Gordy. As the GSP documents, it is, in most cases, very hard with precision to distinguish between groundwater surface water use. And so in this case, that's why we are assuming, because those rainy well collectors or whatever they are located there, that there is some groundwater use or surface water use being used. And the principle here is that water is being pulled from within the basin and being used outside of the basin, so it needs to be accounted for.
Well, it's interesting because, again, there is no groundwater there because I live there, and I know that for at least 400 feet down, there is no groundwater in that location, so that is surface water.
So I think it's important to understand that there, water is water. Starts out on top, ends up in the river or underground. And the, I may have lost my train of thought here. Sorry, my point is still on.
I think
Well,
where you
can
were
I-
going was the combination of surface water and groundwater is the basin, right? That's
Yeah,
one
I
of the
mean,
premises.
I don't want to try to make those kinds of distinctions. Oh, yeah, here it is. Yes, so we have gaining reaches and losing reaches in the river. The river surface and the groundwater are connected. That's why we're in this basin in the first place, because they said, well, you got that problem of interrelated surface groundwater interaction. So you need to be in this GSA. So to me, it's all the same water. Maybe that water that they're getting from the rainy collector is groundwater that entered the river in a gaining reach up there. And maybe that water isn't available in the losing reach down below. You know, it's all one water. So I don't want to make those distinctions.
I'll just, one small thing to add to that is just that I'm using what's reported to the state. So that water system reports that as groundwater to the state.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sean, if you don't mind, could you come up to the microphone? Thank you.
I mean, I guess while he's walking over, I mean, like Al was saying, broad brush, you know, it's not a huge amount of money we're asking them to pay either.
Hi, thank you for letting me make a comment. And you know, for the record, it's really not going to change the outcome for the city of Ukiah because we generally divert about 50% groundwater and 50% surface water for our annual demand. So whether you lump it or split it, my bill is going to be the same because it will just change the divisor. But all day, people have been saying they're indistinguishable. And having been on the TAC and having read this thing 10,000 times, I just flatly disagree with that. We have groundwater wells that are definitely groundwater that are below like 3 aquatards, and it's groundwater, and that is what we're measuring, and we're not unique in having wells like that. We also have surface water intakes that are in surface water and are clearly surface water, and it's very easy to measure those volumes, and many people have those as well. What the GSP really says is how those two interact is not entirely understood, and we need to work on that farther. But saying that they're largely indistinguishable is, I don't think, accurate in any way. There are many sources here that are clearly one or the other, and then there are some where we are not sure. And I just think a whole lot of people are watching this, and we should be technically careful because there are plenty of places here where when you're pumping groundwater, you are absolutely pumping groundwater. And there are many surface water diversions that are absolutely surface water, and they are quite measurable and quite distinguishable. There are other areas where if you have a shallow well directly adjacent to a river, that may be one that we need to refine. But saying that they're almost always indistinguishable is something that I just wanted to get on record with, not agreeing with it at all.
Thank you, Sean. I really appreciate that because I've been trying to say the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, I don't dispute that, but I don't want to try to make those distinctions because I'm afraid that the cost of doing that and the opportunities to have to debate and dispute a determination will end up costing more than whatever it is going to get out.
Eric?
Beth has a comment she put in the chat. I understand the frustration, especially if there is no groundwater available. However, the GSA is working towards sustainability of water that is connected. Therefore, surface water users also benefit from the GSA activity to keep groundwater sustainable. This is a tough concept to explain to the public. Thank you, Beth, for your comment. And thank you, Sean, for your comment in distinguishing that. I think what Catherine was really trying to point out, and what I was trying to really point out in that example of saying that there are statements in the GSP that document that it is hard to distinguish, and we know of from our feedback that that is being said is that when someone has a well where they're pulling water from both groundwater and other sources on a paper basis, it is very difficult to distinguish, and to Director White's point, that adds a layer of a lot of complexity and cost in administration that we have to weigh with the simplicity of this effort. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Indigo, would you like to go to the next slide? It's another example. This is Regina Water Company. Oh, I can use my highlighter here. So this is sort of the donut hole in the GSA's boundary. The DWR has identified this particular piece of land as not being in the basin. Regina has wells. They are close to the river, but they extract water from wells, and they do use that water in this donut hole area. So they are taking water from inside the basin, and they are supplying customers outside of the basin with it. So just another example. Okay? All right. All right, so the cannabis properties. Should cannabis license holders be charged for growing cannabis in cropland fee group 2? Why you might say yes is that these cannabis license holders with medium, large, and nursery seed commercial production licenses are using, and I did have approximately 4.8 acre feet of water per acre year. I'm happy to refine that. If we can find better studies and refine it, happy to do so. Small commercial cannabis license holders have been excluded because they are using about 15,000 gallons of water a month, and that's really just like having a second unit on your property or growing a vegetable patch. So it doesn't seem like they should really be paying as a cannabis license holder in the same way that medium, large, and nursery cannabis holders, license holders are.
So Catherine, I have a question for you here. So you have a cannabis grow on your property of 10,000 square feet, and your property is 100 acres. Are you going to charge a base fee for all 100 acres?
So I'll separate that out. The base fee, yes, because everybody gets paid. Everybody pays the base fee. And then for the cropland, yes, it would be the entire acreage. But I've not seen that kind of where you have that small acreage grown on such a large.
I know of several
acreage.
parcels like that.
Okay.
So,
She only looked at legal, though.
that's right. Yeah, and that's
Well,
legal.
Yes. But why might you decide not to charge them? Well, the water use per acre might be high, but perhaps only small plots of land are used. So the total water is insignificant, and the additional work to include these properties might not be worth the cost. So there's a kind of a couple of thoughts on the cannabis licenses. All right, Indigo, thank you. Fee group 3. Again, I do have an adjustment of 5% to account for any errors, changes. So the total cost divided by the acres. So the fee per acre looks high on this, but as it's applied, you'll see it's well, I'll just stop there. So it's about $101 per acre for this group. All right, Indigo, let's go to the next one. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about appeals and adjustments, and then maybe just take a quick pause. So appeals. There should be a resolution or ordinance that, sorry, I'll take that back, sorry. In your adopting resolution, or it could be an ordinance that sets the fee, there should be an appeals process. But I do think that the GSA needs to be very clear on what kinds of appeals it will consider. So this is to be developed. It does require legal team input. I just want to ensure that it's here in this presentation. And I would suggest that the GSA keeps appeals to whether a property is, for example, in the correct fee group or not, rather than what's the acreage of my property that can be irrigated, for example. And the reason is that we are not claiming, as I've said many times this afternoon, we're not claiming to be precise with this fee. We are making fee groups on broad characteristics. We're not looking at all the individual circumstances. And if the GSA started to have appeals coming in on individual basis, that could end up being problematic. So I think to have an appeals process is the right thing to do. But I think that there should be parameters set for what that appeals process is. Okay, and then I'll just go to the next slide, and maybe we'll have a quick pause there. I've already said data gets better every year, and I've already experienced this. I've worked in the GSA for Salinas. It has 6 subbasins. We have been tweaking and adjusting that fee over time because our data has gotten better. So adjustments will likely be warranted. I just gave you here a couple of examples that could be things that change. Number 1, the public water system can provide APNs associated with their services. There will be some properties right now in their service boundaries that they don't actually serve, but the fee definitions put them into fee group 1 because we can't tell if they're actually being served by the water system or not. But if they develop that, then there will be some parcels then that become fee group 3. So that's one improvement that can be made. On the cropland side, there could be an improvement of distinguishing between the dry farmed and the irrigated crops. So for example, maybe if that agricultural commissioner data helps, perhaps we can incorporate that so that there's an amendment in the fee structure that would shift those costs, has to be proportional to the extractors. Could end up being a new fee group created, for example. I don't know, because I don't know what the data is going to say. But just so you know, tweaks are made in fee studies routinely. It can be done. And you're always striving to do the best you can. All right, are there any questions? We want to take just like a small break.
Would you please speak at the microphone?
Clarification, the fees to the
You gotta get a little
parcels in the
closer.
public water system, those fees will go straight to the public water provider, right?
Correct.
And then they'll figure out how to pay it per parcel. Or
Correct.
whatever.
Yes.
That'll be a legislative process for them.
Yes, they will have to determine how to apportion that cost amongst their customers themselves.
Okay. Did we build in any, like, so for instance, you know, if you're in one of those water systems and your swimming pool has a leak and it leaked out, or you've got a water leak and you know, 5,000 gallons here, whatever, you know, times however many people per year, is that, so you call the water company and they're like, you know, we understand it was a leak, you had it fixed, you proved it, we don't charge you for that water, but yet it still gets reported. So I feel like, I know it's going to be a small amount, but when I was just running some rough numbers, like I looked at Regina, it turns out to be like, with only 1,000 customers, $60 per house. When I looked at City of Ukiah with roughly 5,000 customers, it was $35 a house. So there's disparity there.
So it does depend how the water system decides to allocate it amongst their customers. They could put it in the base fee, they could put it in their use fee, but that becomes their decision as to how they do that.
I was just gonna point out, our water districts already are paying, because IRWA has committed to paying. And so right now, it's not broken up by extraction amount or delivery, but just by service charge. The Roded Valley, is mostly getting surface water now from flood control, but then, it'll just switch around how we're being charged. Roded Valley will probably pay less than we have, unless we're paying Millview when we do get water from Millview from well 6. But then Ukiah will probably pay more, the county will get out of paying, or at least in this model, because right now the county's paying, and it looks like it's not gonna be included in this anymore. So the county of Mendocino's been paying 68 grand as well. And flood control has been paying, which then flood control kind of is taken out of this equation. So that's part of the disparity where some areas are gonna pay more than they are now. Ukiah's looks like they're gonna pay substantially more than they are now. And the water districts that aren't paying at all, they're definitely gonna pay more because they're not paying at all.
Okay. Well, I want to keep going. It's 4:10, so we got to use our time. We've still got things to talk about. All right, so the next section does talk about the cost basis. As I've said, this is not the focus. I just want you to understand the cost basis that I have used for the illustration of the fee. So based on the direction we received at the last board meeting, it was include the mandatory and the high priority PMAs in the cost basis, but in that same motion you said, we also want to know what that cost would be if we just included the mandatory PMAs. So that's why there's 2 columns here. What I've done is I take the estimated costs, I do inflate them by the year in which they are projected to be spent, and then this table summarizes the average annual cost for each of those 2 scenarios. So under the one scenario, the total costs would be about $1,378,000 a year, and under the other mandatory PMAs only, $731,000 a year. That's average for the 5 years, though. Yes, Eric.
I would just like to remind the board a comment that I whispered to you last time. So hopefully this comes across a little bit clearer. Mandatory PMAs is taking a very narrow definition of the word mandatory, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's the right thing for the GSA to do. And so Sigma is very clear about giving the local GSAs the ability to make the decisions on what they think is best for the basin. However, that always has to be balanced and carefully considered with what we anticipate will be acceptable by DWR, because we're always on the hook to demonstrate sustainability with every periodic evaluation and every annual report. So mandatory PMAs does not always equal that is the best course of action, and that's why we are including high priority PMAs. And in my estimation, and my job is to give you guys the best information possible to make the decisions that you will feel most comfortable with. High priority PMAs is included in here because those will most likely result in filling in data gaps, which is the primary priority that we have, and making sure that we're doing everything possible to stay in our lane in compliance with DWR and not getting unwanted attention from them. Thank you.
Yeah, I need to balance out your comments though, because we need to look at, and if you look back on the public input, the input was what is mandatory, because that's what we can handle right now in this economy. So also we have to, you say, what will put us in the best position? How many years do we have to get to that position? Pretty sure the state gave us like 20 years, right? So I don't think we need to front load everything, high priority PMAs into our first year when we have 25% inflation on these people in this valley. So please, I want to take your opinion and give a diverse opinion to that to balance it out. Because I don't think you understand what it's like to live in this valley and have these prices in this valley. The bag of chips price may not have gone up, but you don't get 16 ounces anymore, you get 11 ounces. So the price of everything is higher in this valley. We have tons of low-income rentals. All the prices of all the rentals will go up with all of these, right? Which nobody can afford. So I feel like we really do need to look at mandatory for the first couple years, and then look at maybe if interest rates comes down, maybe if the economy gets better, maybe if we don't have such high inflation in the next couple years. We have plenty of time to play this out. I don't think it needs to be all played out right now.
No, I appreciate that comment. Just one quick note, is that the way I'm thinking about this as well is I'm trying to, again, have us on a path and giving you the ability to make the most informed decision such that we stay out of unwanted attention, being that that could result in having a GSP that is not accepted, and that we then go through we have to go through a revision, which then will add more cost. And then if we don't get that right, then it's substantially more than what we would be
They
doing
accepted
here.
a GSP with a $269,000 budget. So I'm sure they'll accept one with a $731,000 budget, right? I mean, that's the plan they accepted
Yeah.
already. So none of us has a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen with Potter Valley. We don't know what's going to happen with interest rates. We don't know what they'll accept and they don't. But I do know they accepted a $269,000 budget already.
So, Adam, and then I want to say something as well.
Yeah, just to follow after our meeting, I mean, obviously people weren't real happy, and on social media, they were really unhappy. And I'm pretty sure we're gonna see some very, very unhappy people at the March meeting. And so even if it's for the first year or two, I would rather start on the very slow start. Because right now, we're mostly just trying to figure out the cost structure, and then we can always adjust it in a year or two. Like, okay, we can add more or less. And so I would rather do a very conservative rollout for at least a year or two, just partially to head off those angry people that I know we're going to have.
So I've thought a lot about this too, but Eric, we have to support the people who work for us, so I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt from the point of view that you have concerns. I also believe that it's important to have a consultative process with all stakeholders, including the regulators. So as we put our plan together, it makes sense for me to talk to them. We can have intermediaries to help us, such as RCRC or other organizations. But I'm not going to get scared into spending a whole bunch of money. I want to be really clear about that. And again, it's not my money; it's our community's money. So while I want to be compliant, it's something that, yes, we do have 20 years to do it, but we better make steady progress, and we better address the first things that are most important. And to me, it's to find out who uses the water anyway. So we have about 150 ag wells. They're using most of the water. And while I'm not saying that the burden's all on them, it's not. But if we're going to have to take actions, corrective actions for our groundwater, there's not much I can do where I am that's going to help at all, okay? So it's pretty clear. We know when we take action, who's going to have to take action. It's the people who actually pump water. And that's one of the things that we have to remember is sort of a founding principle of this is a level of fairness for who's using the water and how much. And it can't be subsidized. So I'm all in on your groups. They're all pretty good. But group 2 needs some work. And I'm okay with the idea that we can spend some time to research this because we've done it before. So when I did the agricultural water use of the Upper Russian River watershed study, we still have basically all the shapefiles in the GIS layer of all irrigated agriculture in our Upper Russian River Basin. So some of those data exist. And I think probably one of the first studies you really need to do is to figure out exactly where are we really pulling a lot of water out of the basin. That's got to be something as part of our management and everything else we do. We need to know, and that's going to be an important part of the data gaps that we fill, I think, as soon as possible.
One last comment from Director White, then we need to continue on for the sake of time. Thank you.
Yeah, it's this run, we want to keep the cost as low as possible. And our groups are as broad brushed as we can do at this point. Yes, they could be refined. There could be more groups, but we need better information for that. It's a dialogue with the state when we submit our update, as far as, you know, we're going to do, I want us only to do the mandatory PMA. And in dialogue with them, we can come to understand if there's more that they need, then we can ask to do that, recognizing that that doesn't come free and that that's going to, you know, add to our costs. But I don't want to anticipate costs. I want to wait till I know we definitely have to. So that's where I'm on that. And yes, these groups, it's a good get through the first year. But as we get more information, it gets better, we can improve.
Really quick, one comment online from Beth, and then we'll proceed. Is that all right? Beth said, if DWR does not approve a future GSP or annual report or periodic review, the GSA is given a grace period of several months to make changes and respond. It isn't ideal to gain compliance in such a short time, but it is possible. Not burdening our community with added costs needs to be a priority, and the GSA member agencies and cooperative organizations can focus on projects and management actions to adapt to trans-basin diversion and climate changes. Thank you, Beth, for your comment.
All right, let's proceed. Indigo, with the next slide. Thank you. So this does provide the cost projection using the mandatory and the high priority PMAs. So you can see here, starting out 2025, about 1.1 million, and that sort of bobbing up and down between 1.5, 1.4 million there for the next 4 years. Next slide. This shows the project ending cash. If we started out with a fee that raised $1.32 million, then that would provide sufficient cash flow to complete, hopefully, all of the high priority PMAs. They are cost estimates, so it's no guarantee that they're exactly right. But the blue bars show the projected ending cash balance for the GSA each year. There's two sort of criteria for ending cash balances. One is to have reserves at 25% of the costs for the year. That's one that City of Ukiah uses, so that's shown with the yellow bar, line, I should say. And then reserves at 8 months of the non-PMA costs. So that includes the administrative and the DWR reporting costs. Those costs that have to happen each year. And the reason why it's 8 months is because if you primarily obtain your revenue from property taxes, you are waiting from April to December to receive that next payment. So you've got to be able to carry the GSA through all of those months. You've got to have sufficient reserves. Those are the true criteria. I think it's fine if you have 1 year where you don't quite meet one of them. The reason why in 2026 that the reserves wouldn't be at 25% of costs is because costs are high in that year. So, but the next year it comes back down again. So I think that's fine. And I did make a comment here that I do think the GSA should be establishing reserve policies concurrent with the fee studies, so that you have by the end of it could be by the end of the year. It doesn't have to be the same time that the fee study is adopted, but that you have policies for if you receive revenues that exceed what you need for your expenses in a projected year, that you're putting that money aside in a designated fund, and that you're very specific about what you're going to use that money for. And as long as you do that, you're staying within the guidelines of the state, and so and you just draw on it in future years for that purpose. Next slide. This is a projected ending cash balance if you go with the mandatory PMAs. The recommendation is to start out with a fee at $760,000 a year. What happens here is that the first 3 years, the revenues should be fairly similar to expenses. Years 4 and 5, you would be collecting a lot more because in the projection, there's no, there's very little cost in those 2 years. So you could have money then that's left for either doing a strategic action and funding plan, for doing a well inventory registration study, for doing the recharge master plan. Again, it's a projection. I don't know how much money you will actually end up with in years 4 and 5, but you could end up with $400,000 to $500,000 to spend on a study that is of importance to you at that time. If you start out with a fee at $760,000. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right, so now I'm going to show you the draft calculated fees. These results are only shown for the cost basis at $1.32 million for the fee. These are the results. If you have a base fee, all parcels that are not fee exempt pay $4.40 per acre that's within the GSA's boundary. Group 1 is the public water systems. They pay per 1,000 gallons extracted as reported to the state. Group 2 is cropland. That is $40.42 per acre. If there's a base fee, it would be higher, $45.59 without a base fee. Group 3, $101.11 with a base fee, $114.04 without a base fee. Bear in mind, these numbers can still change. And I have assumed in this model iteration that there is a base fee. In the next few slides that you'll see that there is a base fee, and I have assumed that these are administrative costs that are not PMA driven, that are in the base fee. And I have assumed that the cannabis growing properties are included as cropland. Okay? So just briefly, how does the fee get charged? I've already kind of explained some of this, but the average extraction estimate for each public water system is multiplied by the fee. They receive that direct bill. Group 2, we're multiplying the entire acreage of the parcel by the fee per acre and add the base fee, and then it goes onto the tax roll. Group 3, same thing. Fee gets applied to the entire parcel acreage, and then add the base fee. Goes onto the property tax roll. Group 4, just the base fee goes onto the property tax roll. Okay, collecting the fee. Just wanted to be clear here again that for each of these groups, the base fee goes on the property tax unless they don't get a property tax bill, then it's directly billed. Plus, groups 1, 2, and 3 receive a group fee. Groups 2 and 3, it's also on the property tax bill. Group 1, it's just that charge to the public water system. I think we're going to finish and then have questions, right, Eric? I want to make sure we get through this. So the next few slides illustrate what the fee would be for some different kinds of customers. So here we have a home. So we have the base fee. I do make a note on the side that the actual fees for a home in Group 1 depends on how the water provider passes on that GSA fee to its customers. But if they just passed along that fee that they would charge per 1,000 gallons to the customer in the usage fee, then their fee would range between probably about $20 and $50 for the year, depending on how much water they use. Group 3 would pay probably around $50 to $60 because they're unlikely to be in the very low water use range. So sort of in that range for the year. Go to the next slide. If there was no base fee, then you can see there's no base fee added. Now it's just the group fees. But the fee, again, is still sort of in that range of $20 to $60 a year if they're served by a water provider. And if they're in Group 3, not served by a water provider, it's probably in the range of, again, it's still $50 to $60. There's quite a few assumptions in these two tables because I'm assuming the parcel acreage, I'm assuming how the water provider passes on the cost to the customer. So They're not super precise, but I do think they provide a good, reasonable range of costs per year. Okay. Group 1, this is a small apartment complex. It's served by, let's just say it's in the Millview County Water District. It has annual water use of only 84,000 gallons. It's not a very big user. It's a very small apartment complex. If it has a base fee, then it's paying about $38 a year. If it doesn't have a base fee, it's paying about $32 a year. Now, whether the bill is higher or lower of the base fee, it depends totally on the circumstance of that parcel, because it depends on the acreage of that parcel. So some parcels would have a higher fee if you have a base fee, some would have a lower fee.
A lot of apartment complexes are metered, so how does that work?
Yeah. So this is a metered apartment complex. It's in Group 1. So it's paying, according to its water use, it's 84,000 gallons. It's paying the 34 cents per 1,000 gallons.
So does that go to the customer, or does that go to the apartment owner?
Well, the base fee goes to the property owner,
Okay.
whoever owns it. And then the group charge is actually going to Millview County Water District. And like I said, I don't know exactly how they're going to pass it on. I would think that they probably also have a little administrative cost that they will have to add to whatever that fee is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next one. Here's also in Group 1, so this is a small hotel. Also Millview County Water District, so it's in Group 1, but their fee ranges anywhere sort of from $22 to $40 a year. Next one's a Group 3. This is a restaurant that is not located in a water district boundary, so they are obtaining their own water through some method we don't know. So if they have a base fee, their annual fee would be $162 for the year. If they don't have a base fee, then they're at $175 for the year. And here's a sawmill on a 3.6 acre parcel. Their fee would range from $380 to $410 for the year.
I just have to comment again, looking at Medicine or Redwood products and the amount of water that they use, this is not equitable.
So we do have good metered water use data from Millview County Water District. I did analyze that. You're absolutely right. They use a lot of water. But that is reflected in the industrial water use per acre water use. So for their estimation of extraction, I am using actual metered water use from those sawmills for Group 3. Yeah.
I think that they also have their own wells in addition to what they may have a Millview connection for
They might.
potable
I
water.
think they
But,
do too.
yeah, but I'm sure that they have their own wells.
Again, it would be great. It would be great to have the data, but we don't have it. Okay, next one. So this is an example of cropland. It's a 10 acres for purpose of the illustration. So the fee gets applied to the entire parcel, and the fee would be in total between $448 or $455, depending if there's a fee or no fee. Base fee or no base fee, sorry. Okay, next one. And then this is actually our final slide. So this is a comparison of cropland fees with the Sonoma GSAs, which is kind of our closest GSA neighbors. So in Sonoma, there's 3 GSAs. One, the Santa Rosa Plain, they have a charge of $40 per acre foot per year. It's not subsidized, but my understanding is they're a much larger size GSA. They pump a lot more, but they also have a bigger area, right, to spread that fee amongst. Petaluma and Sonoma, smaller basins, pump less customers. They are currently being charged $40 per acre foot per year, but in the fee study that was conducted, if the county did not subsidize them, they should be paying about $123 per acre foot per year in Sonoma and $229 per acre foot in Petaluma. So if you were growing apples or pears, say, in Sonoma, that cost really should be about $221 for the 1 acre of orchard. And so I've compared that with Ukiah's cost per 1 acre of cropland at $45. Now, you could end up with a situation where in Ukiah you're paying for all the acreage, whereas in Sonoma the fee is applied just for your actual extraction, estimated extraction. So there is that difference that's not reflected in this table.
So I feel that that's really equitable because you're basically paying for what you're using, and that's the problem that I have with this flat fee for everything. I don't support it.
We are a little bit over time. Are we okay with going to 4:45 to have another 12 minutes for questions, comments?
Yes.
Okay. Open up to other board members.
First of all, I'm only going to support the minimum one. So all these numbers, you can cut them in half. Secondly, I agree that, Glenn, that this is not what we would like, but it's a way to get there. And then we can decide how much we want to invest in parsing it out to make it more equitable. But on all that little things about equity was only one piece of it. I want to keep the cost as low as possible, and then how far do we want to go to make it more defined? How much do we want to spend? What have we done?
Well, that'll be part of our plan.
I mean, I do like the structure. I mean, I think the structure is good. I mean, I think especially for the first year or two, what we charge should be, like Al said, half. I mean, because we're already going, most people don't realize that even our water districts have been paying. And so for them, it's going from 0 to something. And so if it's a half step to begin with, I think there will be more acceptance in the long run. Otherwise, we're going to have a really severe knee-jerk reaction.
So if I can put that into a way to think about that, what I'm hearing is a glide path concept almost.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
But also, you know, the previous slides, by just the $762,000 for the mandatory, years 4 and 5, the mandates were a lot fewer, right? So we could have $400,000 or $500,000 in year 4 or 5 to do a study or a project or something. So I think, so I think just by going in low doesn't tie our hands behind our backs because, you know, because our costs will be lower in year 4 and 5. So that was, I liked seeing that. Thank you very much. That was promising, you know, I appreciate that.
Okay. Comments from the public. Comment from the public. Chuck, come up and speak in the mic so that we can. Right over there in that corner. Yeah.
Still on mute.
And identify yourself for the record.
My name is Chuck Vaugh. I appreciate Ms. McNerlin's concern regarding what it's going to cost for all this. Obviously, there's never a good time to raise fees. You guys dealt with that all morning long. It's really tough in this county. It's really tough in the farming business right now, really tough. I've been doing it for almost 50 years, and this is the worst I've ever seen it in 50 years. I'm sure a lot of people maybe they don't believe that, don't realize that, but it is bad. We're seeing a change in this valley with the ownership of small ranches and farms. A lot more corporate stuff is coming in. I guess that's another thing that people can think about as they live in this county and how they value their lifestyles here, because it'll change substantially with these large companies coming in. It's just the way it's going to be. That being said, what's the mechanism for collecting these fees? You know, you're going to direct bill to some, you're going to put it on the tax roll for others. Now, we all know that some of these tax rolls haven't been paid in 5, 6, 7 years by some landowners. So, you know, she's got it going year by year by year, and that's all great when that money is there. What are we going to do to facilitate these payments? I don't know how that is going to work. And because if people can't pay if they're not paying their taxes now, obviously that's rolled in for most people. And then the ones that aren't on the tax roll that you just bill directly, for some reason, but now probably they're not going to not pay the municipalities and those, but I was thinking about that, so that's my only.
You raise a really great point, because right now our assessor's not doing real great keeping up with stuff, and you know, there's a lot of issues that have to be considered, and that's why this is going to take some time to implement. Yeah. Thanks, Chuck.
Just, you know, we do allow for delinquencies in the cash flow. I don't, you know, I think we did 3% in there for delinquencies. It's, well, the county used to be on the TITA plan, which meant the GSA would have received all of the money from the fees, but as I understand it, it's suspended. I don't know if that's changed.
Not yet.
Not yet. So that is something the GSA needs to be thinking about with cash flow, definitely. And you know, 3% is a fairly typical percentage to use, but if delinquencies are higher here, maybe we should be building a higher delinquency rate.
But I think it's worth us having a conversation with the tax assessor
Yeah,
and the auditor controller.
yeah.
Any questions or comments from those online?
We also have Carrie Shattuck who'd like to address us as well. Carrie, come to the microphone.
She was kind of answering my question a little bit, like, is this going to be part of the teeter plan? Is this money going to go into there?
Unfortunately, the teeter plan has been suspended for right now because of a really bad cash flow from Mendocino County. So for those of you who don't know what that is, what the county often used to do for agencies is that they would collect the money over time, but they would pay up front to the agency so that they would get their money, the projected tax, or their projected income. But it was costing the county between $600,000 and $700,000, and given our budget crisis at the moment, we suspended it for the time being.
Let's have a conversation about that, because I
Okay,
did not hear
sure.
about that.
Yeah.
Devin has a comment or question, but because of the audio issues, I asked her to please type in a comment or the question in the chat, if you may, Devin. Thank you.
So question for the chairman
Yes.
here on the Board of Supervisors. What is the delinquency rate for property taxes? And, I mean, don't you get a lien on your property if you go so many years without paying your property tax?
Theoretically, yeah.
Theoretically.
Yeah, so it's
Oh,
beyond
don't tell me this. I got a pretty big tax bill.
You know, we have not had a tax auction for many, many years. That's for people just completely stop paying taxes, and there's quite a few parcels in Mendocino County in that condition. So don't look at me. I'm only a member of the Board of Supervisors. That's our elected officials. The auditor, controller, treasurer, tax collector is responsible for taking care of that along with county council. Yes, we do. Yeah, they're interim, but we do have one.
And by state law, the county can't start that process, the lien, until they're delinquent 5 years. So they can get to 5 years, pay 1 year, and still just be in arrears for 4 years.
Right.
And then just keep on kicking the can down the alley until, yeah, and legally the county can't do anything.
Yeah, we're getting a little far afield here, so let's try to.
No, this is all really good.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Devin's question and comment was, can materials for the March meeting be prepared to plan to address some of these common questions heard so far? This could assist with the process.
Yeah.
And there's more.
And also, can a map of the GSA area be clearly posted on the website? I thought we have one, but yes, I will double check that for you, Devin. Thank you for that. All right, we have a couple more minutes. Any other questions or comments from anyone on the board, online, or in the room today?
Just a quick comment from me, the overall study is quite good, and the amount of detail and work that's gone into it is quite good. And it's just based on the reality of an unfunded mandate, which I think everyone has talked about here. It's just really bad timing. You know, had this happened when it was tall cotton and you know, good weather, we probably would have looked at this real different. It just couldn't have come at a crappier time. And we have uncertainty with the Eel River diversion. We have uncertainty with the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board also wanting to tack fees on us for each acre of irrigated land for vineyards. So all this stuff is really weighing heavy on everybody's mind, while we're also in a trough in terms of the business cycle for vineyards and agriculture. So don't take everything personally if you don't feel like you're getting a warm response. So, Al.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for the work you put in on this. I know we paid you for it, so it's not gratis.
What was the reality check?
But it's a great framework that can be applied as we go through to try to increase equitability and all these other things, and you know, try and refine it. But it's starting here. We have a tool to minimize the expense going forward to make those kinds of changes. Thank you for that.
We have one comment and question posted online from Jamie Neary from Russian Riverkeeper. Recognizing that fees can be burdensome and the need to ensure a fee is equitable, are there other ways to incorporate incentives to help better balance fees with the GSA's regulatory needs to implement priority projects? Any? No comment from the board? Okay. I think in general, right, the big theme that we're hearing today, and please correct me if I'm not characterizing this properly, is that we recognize this is imperfect, but it is our best option based on the data we have, and we intend over time to improve upon what we're doing with further data collection where we can, and that until we understand exactly what we're going to pay for in the future when we do the final resolution adoption, that more work will go into this in the March TAC meeting, where we're going to dig into more of the technical aspects and having the technical committee provide their comments on the mandatory and high priority costs that are being considered. And then in April, we will further refine that, and then ultimately in June, we will have a path where we are deciding on exactly what the fee will be, cost basis wise, and then moving from that. Is that a good characterization?
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We were asked to make two decisions today, base fee or no base fee, and how to treat legal cannabis growers in the fee structure.
Technically, it's not a decision. It's just informing you that those decision points are coming in the future when we do the final resolution for the fee.
Well, it says asking the board for direction.
Direction, but not an official vote unless you feel comfortable doing that.
We don't have to have an official vote. I think she needs direction
Yeah.
in order to move forward with this,
So
to go any further.
I'm just clarifying that.
Okay, but
Yeah.
she needs direction.
And
So
she-
we do
she-
need to give her
She
direction.
did take a choice on both of those in the example that
Right.
she gave us. And I'm supporting the example, which is saying that I support the direction.
I mean, should we make a motion?
So I just want to get a feel for where we are at. Yes on the base fee or no on the base fee?
Yes, on the base fee.
Yes on the base fee. I think we have a consensus yes on the base fee. Okay, how to treat legal cannabis growers in the fee structure? As
Cropland.
crop?
Cropland.
Yes.
Yes? As
Yes.
crop. So there's your direction.
Okay, and that's what was built.
And
Okay.
just,
I'm going to be a dissenting vote on the cannabis thing because I'm a little uncomfortable knowing that some people have large acreages with small grows, and I can't see charging them $40 an acre for
Well, it would be based on their acreage, wouldn't it?
Of the whole parcel.
the
Oh,
whole
the whole
parcel.
parcel.
So
Whole parcel.
I'm going to be a dissenting vote on that. I can't go along with that.
Indigo, just housekeeping wise, is there any reason we need to make a vote, or is this okay? And then we could always make this official later.
Yeah, I would recommend that we don't need to make a vote right now. I think the straw poll on a base fee is enough to give Catherine direction, and we don't need to make a decision on cannabis use today for Catherine to move forward. We can also get the tax feedback at the March meeting if the TAC has any opinions on the cannabis use.
So I also want to double check on cannabis because they're highly regulated with water, and I want to know what exactly State Water Resources Control Board already charges them.
And it also sounded like there was some other data sources for us to look into that were revealed through today's meeting, and so we can do that research with Catherine and report back.
I just wanted to make sure for the record that we're clear about that we're not making a vote on this and that we will
Correct.
do that officially at a later time, and we're just getting feedback. Okay.
Yes.
Well, it is 4:48. Any other comments or feedback from anyone?
You wanted 2 minutes to discuss the next agenda? Is that necessary?
Yeah, I can do that really quick.
Okay.
So the next meeting and workshop, we're gonna have a public workshop in March. We're gonna have a TAC meeting in March as well to get the tax feedback that will then be shared and reported to with the board at the April meeting. So the future agenda items for the April meeting will be Catherine will present the draft fee study report and getting comments and feedback on that. We will also be reviewing the results from the annual report from the water year 2023 that's going to be completed and submitted by April 1st. And then also other follow-up items for monitoring, data collection, and then any other information that will help with informing the fee study and providing the best information to the board to make a decision in the future. So that's the future agenda items that you can anticipate.
Can we put it on the next agenda to consider having meetings in the morning? And maybe do a little research to see if this room's available the same day, but just in the morning.
Sure.
Yeah,
I mean, it gets you guys home earlier. You got a long drive, right? I mean, if we could just start at 9 or 10 a.m., I think it'd be I mean, it'd be
Oh, yeah,
nice
we can
not to
consider
have
that.
it's like right in the middle of the day, you know, when you, so,
Yeah.
personal, but I'm just asking. Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Make a
Yeah.
motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. I'll just say adjourn. We're done. Thank you all, especially those of you who traveled so far.
And thank you everyone online for being patient with us as we navigated the technology issues. We will have those resolved hopefully by the next meeting. Thank you.
Okay. So, we're looking at this. So